Honey, I think I shrunk my chassis. Yup. Hi guys, Matthew here and welcome back again to my channel. This little cute thing right next to me is Be Quiet's latest addition to their mid-tower chassis portfolio, which goes by the name of PureBase 500. This is one of their most compact chassis to date, but despite of that, as you will see later on, it offers a great deal of flexibility. As you've probably noticed, I have the metallic grey model of the PureBase 500. It looks sort of like a dark silver color, and I personally like it the most next to the white and black color choices, which they also offer for this model, but this color is a welcome departure from your common picks. It has a really nice coating and feel to it. The front panel has that brushed aluminum look to it, although that part is obviously made out of plastic. On top of that, you can see your usual I/O array of ports, two USB 3.0 ports, so no USB-C ports, audio in and audio out jacks, and a big power on switch that lights up. This version also has a tempered glass left side panel, which completes the look, while you can get a version without it, which will keep around $10 to $15 in your pocket, depending on the color choice also. Overall, the chassis looks very industrial and minimalistic, but with a little bit of that flair, for example these round edges, just to give it that extra something, which is sort of like Be Quiet's signature move for all of their other models too, which I'm overall a fan of. Before I go on and continue with my detailed overview of this model, let's first go ahead and put a build in it. Yeah, I know that there's already something in it now, but I want to show you how that went. Editing Matthew, roll the tape. Roll it. Roll it. Come on. Right. With everything in its place, it's really hard to find any major complaint when it comes to ease of putting it all together. Of course, the first step before entering in it is to remove the tempered glass side panel, which has a total of 4 sort of like half thumb screws in each corner, meaning you don't need a screwdriver to remove them, after which you can just pop the glass off, which is a pretty usual way of handling it, and I appreciate how they've aligned the bottom feet a bit outside of the chassis frame, so the glass can sit on it and have a more stable ground once you pull the screws off. I also like the fact that the glass is just ever so slightly tinted, if at all, so you can really get a good look at the components in it, while they've also covered the edge of it with the same color scheme as the chassis. Although the chassis is a bit smaller compared to what I've reviewed lately, like the Silentium PC AR7X TG model, feel free to check it out in the right top corner of this video, I had no problems whatsoever with handling components in it, thanks to the fact that to the right of the motherboard tray we have a completely clean space. Up here you can put up to two 2.5-inch drives, you can see 4 dedicated holes below and above this boxy looking thing with Be Quiet's logo on it, and actually that's a removable cable cover for them. Speaking of the cables, there's plenty of cutouts around the motherboard tray, especially on the bottom, while none of them have any rubber grommets. In a way that was for a reason, because Be Quiet went for this interesting looking right angled canal cover on the main right side of the motherboard, which would be great in a case where all of the connectors on the motherboard are right angled, but on majority of them they are not. So that cover ends up being a bit too tight because it's pretty low, especially when a cable needs to go up and above to be connected onto a port which is vertically oriented on the motherboard, like for example a thick 24-pin ATX power cable. Other than that, you can accommodate basically anything in terms of the components, up to 190mm tall CPU coolers, 369mm long graphics cards, and up to 360mm radiators on the front or 240mm radiators on the top. As you probably noticed, the bottom third of the chassis is occupied by the power supply shroud, and I personally don't mind it at all when they do it like that, a complete cover from back to front. It looks more unified and cleaner, while they left some space on the top front in order to give some extra room and clearance for the radiator. Up here they've also put little triangle cutouts so the drives and power supply can breathe a little bit easier, since the heat will not get trapped down there, although that could potentially bring the temperatures up a bit for the rest of the hardware inside of the main compartment. Let's get outside from here for a second and check out what's installed for us behind the other right side panel, which is, as you may notice, just a regular panel without any cutouts or bulges that goes easily off with undoing two thumb screws, which they put once you do that, so you don't have to be afraid of losing them. I really like how they've simplified and cleaned things behind the back. This is how the cables were when I opened up the right side panel for the first time. All nice and tidy thanks to plenty of pre-installed Velcro ties, and most importantly, everything back here is really easy to handle. You need to put in some drives in the drive cage, or you want to move it a bit for better radiator clearance, or you don't need it at all. No problem, two thumb screws and it's gone. Same goes for the 2x2.5 inch drive plate behind the motherboard tray. Bam, one screw and it's down. Need to have better cable clearance during your installation, or if you want to showcase your 2.5 inch drives from the inside of the motherboard, as I mentioned earlier. There, it's done. Again, only one thumb screw. All in all, in terms of the cable management, there were no hiccups, especially if you plan to use only M.2 drives in the beginning, like I did here. If you're, for example, building a new configuration from scratch and planning to add more drives later on, the clutter will be minimal and everything will look really clean. There's enough cable tie points around the whole back area to route everything properly. As you saw, you'll get a lot of Velcro ties together with some zip ties in the bundle, plus the room between the side panel and the motherboard tray is big enough to accommodate anything cable-wise. The same can be said for the power supply area. You can tuck its and other excess cables in there, and if you don't plan to keep the drive cage, this will be even easier for you, while with it you will have to squeeze them in a bit. Last but not the least, let's talk about the chassis cooling and noise performance. Why I say noise? Well, first and foremost, as it's a Be Quiet chassis in question, they made sure to put some sound dampening material on the front, side and top panels. You already saw me pulling off the right side panel, while on the top we have this futuristic and clean angle cut looking panel, held down by magnets, which again has these triangle looking pattern cutouts, which will enable you a limited amount of airflow. The front panel can be easily removed just by pulling it from the bottom, and thankfully it's not connected to the front I/O, so you don't have to be scared of pulling any wires off together with it, and I for one really appreciate this design choice, so it's easier to handle your cooling solution at this spot, and here you can again see the sound dampening material. Since trying to make the chassis as quiet as possible usually overlaps with the cooling performance of it and its general ability to move air in the case where the intakes and outtakes are being blocked off or restricted by design, it's time to take a closer look how this affects the PureBase 500, which has some of those design choices. For starters, Be Quiet pre-installed two of their 140mm fans, one on the back and one on the front, those being the non-PWM versions of the PureWings 2 models, which are one of the top choices when it comes to noise to performance ratio. They are really quiet, especially these 900 RPM models which they've put. In terms of moving the air through the chassis, the front panel seems to be pretty blocked off. It has some mesh-like intakes on the side edge of it, but judging by the size of it and the fact that it also has some dust filters on it, it looks to be pretty restricted. I assume that a single fan on this type of front panel, serving as a cold intake solution, will have less effect on the airflow and cooling, maybe with the 2-fan configuration. With the stock amount of fans in the chassis, that being 2 of them, it seems like it makes more sense to put that front fan onto the top, so you can move out the accumulated heat as fast as possible. With doing so, you could leave the hardtop cover or put the magnetic mesh filter, which Be Quiet bundles with this model, but either way the airflow potential will be somewhat restricted, since the mesh filter is pretty dense and the hard cover has just few cutouts and it partially covers the fan, so in the end it's probably better to leave everything off. That was confirmed with actually testing these scenarios, and here are a few screenshots of that, also followed up with the noise testing for each setup. As you saw, the difference is pretty obvious, so you will have to weigh in if you want to have a little bit of extra cooling performance versus keeping the dust buildup as slow as possible. Of course, beside the dust filters which I mentioned, there's another one on the bottom side for the power supply, and it actually covers the whole bottom surface of the chassis, and it's easily removable from the front. Down there you will also find 4 plastic feet which raise up the chassis for better air intake clearance, while they have a rubberized padding on them so the chassis stays planted. When you draw the line, it's really hard not to like the new Purebase 500. I wouldn't hesitate at all in recommending it, as it checks all the boxes for anyone who is in search for a capable and straightforward chassis that can accommodate your latest hardware choice, with looking good and being practical while doing so, while the only problem it has lays in the fact that it faces a very strong competition at this price point. That's it for this time from me. Thank you once again for watching. Please take a second to toss me a thumbs up if you enjoyed my content. That really helps a lot. And if you like what you saw, feel free to subscribe, and if you already are, be sure to press that notification bell down below so you don't miss out on a new video. And until then, catch you later, guys.